Good day, my name is Alvinus Melius from St. Lucia, and this tutorial is for week 1 of Introduction to Music Production at condenserVsDynamic. I will be teaching the essential differences between dynamic and condenser microphones. These two categories are two of the major categories in microphones that persons intending to purchase mics and use mics in the studio generally consider. And in making your choice, you need to consider what the differences are and how each one works so that you can make the best choice for the application that you want to make of that particular microphone. The first thing we're going to consider is the difference in frequency response. In the diagram here, you can see two graphs. The red line graph is for a specific condenser microphone, and the blue line graph is for a specific dynamic microphone. And we can see some differences in terms of the general frequency response of these microphones. And this is typical for a condenser versus a dynamic microphone. In the red line curve, you can see that generally the curve is a flatter curve. The curve covers a wider range on the graph. You can see it starts from 0.02, whereas the blue line curve, which is for the dynamic mic, generally has a more shaped curve. It starts at a much lower magnitude and it goes up to a much higher magnitude than the condenser microphone. And these frequency responses, these differences in frequency response has to do with the setup inside the microphone. One of the things is the size of the diaphragm in the microphone, which is what we will discuss next. So we're looking at diaphragm size and weight as our second difference. In terms of the diaphragm, dynamic microphones generally have heavier and larger diaphragms than condenser microphones. And this translates into condenser microphones working better generally. They are more sensitive, and they also work better at high frequencies because the high frequencies have very low energy and it's easier for them to shift or disturb the smaller diaphragm than for them to shift or disturb a larger diaphragm as found in the dynamic microphone. And dynamic microphones are generally used for low to mid frequency sound and instruments as well, whereas condenser microphones are generally used for high frequency instruments such as cymbals, pianos, acoustic guitars, and so on. We also want to look at the internal circuitry of these microphones. And we have a diagram here showing the internal circuitry of a dynamic microphone, and you can see that the diaphragm is connected to some coils, okay, that move around, and there are some magnets involved as well. Because the diaphragm in the dynamic microphones is heavier and generally larger, it is able to produce enough electricity when under sound pressure so that it can produce a signal. So this means that the dynamic microphone does not require the use of external energy sources such as phantom power, whereas condenser microphones need phantom power because their diaphragms are lighter and unable to generate enough electricity for a signal. The next difference is in durability. And of course, this is a generalization, but it is true for most condenser microphones that they are more fragile. Okay, as a matter of fact, with some condenser microphones, even higher sound pressure can damage them. Okay, and for this reason, generally you will find dynamic microphones being used more for live performances than condenser microphones. And dynamic microphones have a history, they fall all the time. You look at microphones, the popular microphones like the Shure SM58, which is basically a standard microphone that is used in so many live performances. And these mics can take a serious beating and still work perfectly. The last difference, well, not the last difference, but the one before the last that we want to look at is that dynamic mics are generally easier to set up in live performance scenarios. During a live performance, you may have several band members playing different instruments, maybe several of them are singing, then you have sound coming from the monitors, you have sound coming from the crowd. You have so many different sources of sound that if you're using a microphone that is sensitive to sound coming in various directions, then the likelihood of you getting things like feedback is higher. Having said that, on a condenser microphone, it is possible to restrict the direction in which sound is picked up as well. And so this, while this is generally true, it may also have to do with your settings in various scenarios. The last difference that we want to look at is your bank account health. Cost is always a consideration in whatever you are doing. And so whether you spend a little bit of money or you spend a lot of money becomes an issue, because not all of us have as much cash to splurge on our studio equipment or even just our microphones. And so generally speaking, dynamic microphones cost less than condenser microphones. Okay, and these are some of the differences that you need to know in making a choice in terms of which microphone you will buy for your studio. Thank you. Goodbye.